sermon. This sermon and the last several have been by request, and this one was by Vince, as he was hammered with a startling diagnosis of cancer. And my guess when that happened, that really brought a lot of things into tight focus. Guess what? Here's all the other stuff. Man, when you get something like that, boy, that vision gets to be really narrowed down to the most important things. So he asked me, Paul, would you preach a sermon on, if I were the devil, what would I do to distract Christians? I thought, man, that's easy. And the answer is everything. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, what would Satan use along that line? Well, Paul, if you wanted to fish, what would you use to fish? The answer is anything the fish will bite on, right? I grew up in Ohio. Well, there it was minnows and worms for perch. Out here, whether you're fishing for salmon or halibut or rock cod or whatever, maybe plugs or lures, anything will work. People have used yarn and salmon eggs, anything that will work. What do you put in a mouse trap? Anything that'll work for mice. I generally wouldn't put lettuce in there. That's not as strong. And so as we think about that, the reality is anything in life can be a distraction. It doesn't have to be bad, but the reality is everything is a possibility, and it depends on what do you want your focus to be. And so I thought I'd start by saying Satan is real. And I use graphics, and I thought, well, I didn't want to use the standard one. Oh, yeah, everybody here is red and horns and such as that. But the reality is, Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12 said, our fight is against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil. It's not just happens to be. It's not just like people end up being. There is a real and spiritual enemy. The reality is there is a war waging in that spiritual realm every day, every second, at this very moment. It's always going on. Now we see that happening in places in the world. But that's an incomplete view. It's happening everywhere in the world. It's happening all the time in the world. Charles Spurgeon, preacher of a century ago, said, consider how precious a soul must be that when both God and devil are after it. And so where are you, where are we in this journey that we're on? So I thought about what are there? Well, I really had 2 pages of things. I thought, you know what? They're not going to sit still for 2 pages. So I thought I chose a handful of things to look at of what can distract. And the first thing that jumped to my mind is busyness. I don't mean business. I don't mean doing your job. But we talk about the complexity of modern life. And interesting, what Bob Wielander wrote about Mary and Martha, guess what, is that very first one that we're looking at, because it's a biblical example. Luke 10:39, and Mary was listening to the Lord's word seated at his feet. So somebody is there just drinking in what Jesus had to say. But Martha was, and there's the word, distracted with all her preparation. And she came up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Tell her to come help me. So one's listening and one's working. Now, guys have generally different point of view than women do, and how clean a house needs to be and how much stuff needs to be done before the company comes. For a man, well, if the clutter is generally, there's a pathway through and there's some food, we're okay. That's not where women usually are. Just the one that comes to my mind repeatedly is several years ago we had a couple of young men that were Fort Lewis Rangers, And great guys, and one was already a Christian, and then we baptized the other one. And so I said, man, it would be great. I said, hey, would you guys like to come over for, maybe it was a summer. I said, what about if we have some steak? You come over for steak dinner. Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Paul, what do you know about cooking? Nothing. And so I went to the store and I said, look, I've got some Army Rangers. And, what kind of steak? And the meat cutter lady came out and I said, pick us some good ones. She came out from behind the counter and I said, what kind of steak we want? She said, what you want is ribeye. Good. Give them to me. And she picks them out. I said, now what do I need for seasoning? She walks me down the aisle. Here's what you need. Great. We get home. I've got a barbecue. I said, either you guys know how to barbecue. I don't know how to barbecue. Guys, I do. Okay, you cook it. So now we got steaks on the grill. Man, already, even now, my mouth is watering. Glenda comes out and says, where's the salad? I said, what? Salad? I didn't invite him for salad. I had invited him for steak. She said, Paul, you can't just serve him just steak. That's how Guy thinks. You coming over, we got steak. Steak and football. What else does there need for guys to be happy? Oh, no, you got to have potatoes, got to have salad and such as that. And so think about how women, if you're having company, you want everything to be nice and the other people will think, blah, blah. Guys are much more relaxed about that. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, and only a few things are necessary, and really only one. And Mary has chosen a good part. I know how that is, and we guys try to help, but to us that's not that big a deal. But to women it is. And so if you love your wives, you're going to help and get all the things ready. But you think about in life what distracts us. People feel like, man, if there's a cobweb over here, or a kid's toy over there, what do the people think? Generally they think, wow, they're people like us. They don't freak out over stuff like that. They want to know, do you care about me? Am I welcome there? That's what really makes a difference. But our life is really complex. I just thought about some of the stuff. It's not bad stuff, but there's tons and tons of it. There's emails and texts and calls. And I put in the should-dos and the must-dos and the social obligations and the bills and the notes and the flowers and others' expectation and the dog and the house and the yard. And there's just stuff. And the doorbell's ringing and the washer overflowing and the dishwasher, blah, blah. All this stuff happens all the time. I have a list. In fact, it's on my phone. It's my to-do list. It always stays there. The number of things just change. You cross some off the top, add some on the bottom, and everything gets pushed up. It never ends. And I tell people, one of these days, there's going to be a plot in the ground. They're going to be poke me into it. And somebody's going to come up, Paul, there's more to do. I said, that's right, but I'm out of here. And so there's always something to do. And it is so distracting. Now, what about us? What if we have the right attitude? Think about this. What's the most important focus in your life? And are you pursuing that right now? If you say, yeah, well, I was going to mean to, but I have kind of these things, and, there's the dogs and the neighbors and expectations and extended family. What's most important? Your relationship with God, your care for your family, for your children, the kind of influence you can have for others. I like a mowed lawn. Glenda thinks we ought to have somebody come in and mow it. Don't need that. I mow it twice a summer anyhow. Well, and the funny thing, we walk around the block and it's like that old redneck saying, so how you can tell you're a redneck is you mow your lawn and you find your pickup there. Well, it's not that bad for us. I'll get up a few inches. Because there's other things, that's important. I like it to look nice. But people are more important than grass. Grass will be there. What's the most important things in your life? And are you doing them now? Or are you really too distracted? What Satan distracts with is wealth and materialism. Wealth's not bad. God gives the power to make that. He made the material world. But in Luke chapter 12 and verse 18, he said, here's the rich man, said, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there will I store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Now I can retire. In verse 20, God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. I think about that because I was young and saw a tragedy and life and death situation. 10 years old, became highly aware of that. And so I kind of stay in tune with that so it doesn't sneak up on me. But think about what can take life in an instant. You say, well, yeah, but I'm young, and man, I got 90 years ahead of me. Car crashes snuffs out life in a blink. Natural disasters, hurricanes and flood. We don't have a lot of those, tornadoes and things like that here. Floods, some other parts of the countries are really hammered by that. Undiagnosed disease, heart attack, arrhythmia, brain hemorrhage, home invasion, anything. And so as you think about that, think about that attitude of Jesus saying in Matthew 6 and verse 2, where your treasure is, there is your heart also. You get diagnosed with an illness. Your child is in a tragedy. All the stuff, the fluff, the email, the grass, doesn't matter anymore, does it? Because why? Here's the most important person in your life, and you're going to do whatever you can to take care of them. Where's your treasure? Wealth isn't evil, but it does distract. In 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 26, not many wise, not many mighty, not many noble are called. Why? Because there's other things that demand their attention. About a week ago, I saw a note, I think it was Steven Spielberg, and here's, the Star Wars and such, others, and about how here's the super rich and their yachts, and this one's $4 million, and this one's $13 million, and this one's, $189 million. And I thought, wow. And then I thought, I tend to be more practical. I said, what would it take for upkeep for that? They said, well, for the high end, you got to have a staff, and you pay them, and that's $5 million a year. And then there's gasoline and storage and repairs, and it'll tend to go all between $12 and $30 million a year. I thought, man, I could take a ferry across the Sound for $25, and so that is an amazing amount of money, and they just do that all the time. Where is our focus? Is taking care of your families and blessing others and giving to God. Those are good things. But don't let that interrupt the most important thing, is your service to God. Satan distracts with pleasure and entertainment. And I like pleasure. I like being happy. I like doing fun things. And Apostle Paul says to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2, and then I'll drop to verse 4, he said, men will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And so I put here, Seahawk football up on the screen. All right, Seahawks are playing. I watched them every year, except this year. I said, I got to pay extra to watch the Seahawks. I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that this year. I like Seahawks. I like football. But it really doesn't add to my life. It's recreation. I get Prime Video for free, and so I watch somebody else play on Thursday night. It doesn't matter that much to me. What is the most important thing? Philippians 3 and verse 19 talked about some whose God is their appetites, and they mind earthly things. You see, Hawk football isn't bad. Having a phone isn't bad. Having a PC, I have them, probably most all of us do. But when that comes in competition with God and family and others, then we've made that our idol. Why not assemble with believers on Sunday night? Why not on Wednesday? Well, I got important things to do. I got to rest up for Sunday night football or laying around or whatever. And so I just thought about what an impact that has on our lives. When you think about Hebrews chapter 10, 24, that is, consider one another, how to stimulate to love and good works. What can we do to take the next step? What if we say, all right, what I hadn't been, but I am going to start coming on a Sunday night or on a Wednesday or picking up a class on Zoom. It is interesting, of all the workplace distractions, the internet is the greatest productivity drain of all, so says recent studies. And a third of employees worldwide admit to spending up to 2 hours a day pointlessly browsing online during work hours. Whoa! Well, what about you? That's a massive waste of time. And so, different studies will have different numbers they give, but 4 hours a day on average people spend on the phone or on the web. Internet devices of all kinds, for some people, many people, is 6 hours a day. I don't have that much day to be spending that. Now, I'm not talking about, can you be doing some other work and you got going on in the background, you just like noise, that's different. But if you stop doing what you could be doing and doing something that really, when you get done, you ask yourself, do I feel better for having watched that? Well, no. And sometimes you say, man, that was a crummy program. Then why watch that? Maybe have spiritual music on the back, something where you get done and you say, I am better now because I did that. In Psalm 101 and verse 3, it said, I will set no worthless things before my eyes. I like that. Well, prioritize. What's the most important thing to you? It used to be, guys would come home, read the newspaper. Now you get on the web, on your PC, on your phone, blah, blah. What about the kids? You're spending time with them. Say, hey, let's do something really cool together. Let's go. And you find something that appeals to them, that's good for the family, and really spend great time together. Satan distracts with good things, but then makes them the priority. Satan distracts with sinful habits and guilt. In 2 Samuel 12, and I just summarize this in verses 20, not down through 4, but 20 down through 24. Here is where David, in his sin with Bathsheba, he looked where he shouldn't have looked. He sent for who he shouldn't have sent for, and did what he shouldn't have done. Now, the reason I just brushed by that is because you can apply that to anything in life when we've stepped across the line and doing something we shouldn't be doing, thinking something we shouldn't be thinking, involving somebody else that we shouldn't be involving. Now, the point I want to make is, what kind of ripple effect did that have in David's life? Nathan the prophet said, the sword will never depart from your house. When you look at him and the result of that, there was a pregnancy, a man's murder, national disgrace, God dishonored, his daughter raped. This is sequentially, obviously not all at once. A family rebellion. He can't, because of his own sin, can't reasonably address his son's sin. There's an assassination plan by one of the sons, and including the baby. In total, 3 sons die because you made wrong choices. Man, that sends chills down me. If we think, before we take the next step, whatever it is, if it's in the wrong direction, ask, do I like where that journey is going to take me? If you say, man, that's not a good journey, that's it. Maybe I ought not to take that next step. And so David in Psalm 51 said in verse 3, my sin is ever before me. It's not like I said, well, that's a few mistakes. Oh no, when his catastrophe, and you engineered it, David. And he said that I feel like all my bones are broken. You're in a car accident. Wow, that's internal. Because just devastated by what he's done. That he said, God, you want stability. David hadn't been reliable. And he said, make me to know the joy of thy salvation. When you wander away from God and you're on the wrong track, you don't feel good on the inside. You know, why, there's that self-condemnation. And he wanted forgiveness. Purify me, that I might be whiter than snow. So, application of the Apostle Paul, when he looked back on his life, one preacher at one time said, Paul would have potentially been killing the Christians that Peter was baptizing. Now live with that. You go, did it on purpose. He said, wretched man that I am. He looked back on his life. But who shall deliver me? He said, now there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ. That's one of the beauties about being a Christian. The past can be moved to the past. We got a future ahead of us, and we're going to take that next step. In Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1, lay aside every weight and encumbrance that so easily entangles us. So, is there something you need to get out of, put it aside, make a new start? Get rid of, ask forgiveness for, repent of, make a change in. He says, fixing our eyes on Jesus. So, all right, I'm going to take that next step because Satan distracts with sinful habits and guilt. Satan distracts with discouragement of all different kinds. And I just kind of bundled a number here. Some is negative advice for, you should never do that. You're a wreck. You're going to go to jail just like your Uncle Henry. Well, you might as well give up. And that's, Job's wife. In Job chapter 2 and verse 9, he went through so much, and she was married to him, went through all this. She said, curse God and die. I mean, just get out of it all. And he said, you talk like one of the foolish women. Shall we not accept good from God's hand and not tragedy as well? And so sometimes other people's advice drag us down. You say, look, I'm not going to go by their negative opinion. I'm going to go by what God says. It may just be hopeless comments in general. Psalm chapter 3 and verse 2, David said, many are saying of my soul, there's no deliverance for him in God. Man, you are never getting out of that. I tell you, you are done for. You're down the drain. You just might as well throw up your hands and quit. And David said, oh no, I'm not doing that. If our attitude is, I'm going to do the best I can. And I've appreciated Christians that all the way along, they've done that. And most recently, Vince said, hey, I got a job to do. I got a family to love. I got some plans to make here. Do the best I can with help. I have got limited time. But guess what, folks? Everybody has limited time. We just haven't ticked it off on the calendar yet. And David said, my hope is in God. And sometimes what discourages is other people's poor choices, because that kind of impacts you either emotionally or personally or such as that. Psalm 69:6, David said, may those who wait for thee not be ashamed through me, O Lord. That may I not be a catastrophe. That Psalm 121, 2 and 3, I look to the mountains. Where shall be my hope? I will look to the Lord. And that's really the answer to this. That what do you do with discouragement? You say, Satan, get behind me. I've got other priorities. I'm just not going to focus on, well, here's the disaster they made. Well, how does that change you? Well, it really shouldn't change me at all. It just cuts my heart out. All right. Jesus is the heart knower. Let him heal your heart. Get back on track and help the people that want to go in the right direction. What if it's your own declining health or somebody else's health along that line? And I thought about going through Ecclesiastes chapter 12. It talks about how the clouds return after the rain. And here's the Campo family down in DuPont of, man, one issue after another. Just be horrendous. And yet David said in Psalm 31:15, my times are in thy hand. Guess what? All of our times are in his hand. Yeah, but God, I got other plans. God said, I understand. I've got other plans for you. And here's how that's going to work out. You get 2 days or 20 years or 16 years and whatever it is. Once you say, God, I'm just yours. You do whatever you want. And I'll do the best that I can in that. It can be the fear of the future. fear of the present, fear in general. Philippians 4:19, my God will supply all your needs. And so if our attitude is, God, I can't control what goes on in the world, but you do, and I'm just a servant. Whatever you want, I will do, and try to have the best attitude and encourage everybody around me. I want to grow to that next step. And I want to close here this morning with Psalm 34 and verse 7. But those who seek the Lord shall not be in want of any good thing. Once you say, there's my focus, how do you deal with distractions? Say, look, we have a law in Washington, and you're not supposed to be on your phone while you're driving. Have you ever touched your phone while you're driving? I'm not asking for any answer. Yeah, but this is important. Yeah, well, wham! And you get smack somebody else or get smacked by them. I was here we live in Federal Way, and I'm sitting at a stoplight. I get hit by, 35 miles an hour, wham, by this gas. I'm in my pickup, and she's in a little Jeep Cherokee or something. And it slammed me, pushes me through the stoplight. I'm in the middle of the intersection. I thought my car blew up. But I thought, wait a minute, my car didn't blow up. I got hit from behind. Guy on a motorcycle pulls around and says, I saw it all. She was on her phone. The little gal gets on the phone. She said, I went on my phone. I said, yeah? How come you hit me? I'm standing still at a stoplight. Her focus was somewhere else. So she said, all right, I want to take the next step. What am I going to do? I'm going to get that focus narrowed down. Christ is most important in my life. What's that next step for you? Is it repentance? Is it being baptized into Christ? If it's studying to find out what would God have me to do? Are you a believer and say, I'm really not doing wrong things, but I'm really not focused on the right thing. Whatever is your focus. Is your focus on the Lion of Judah? I came this little graphic. Here's a kind of a cub looking in the water, but who's looking back is the mature lion. And that's what Jacob talks about, how Judah, the Lion of Judah, the line of Christ, that he would be a lion's cub. We're serving him. And so what distracts? Everything distracts. And we just have to say, all right, what's most important? Then I'm going to do the most important thing right now. And we'd be glad to help you, however that is. We're going to be singing a song, number 207. Let's be standing. Hark the gentle voice. God's saying, I'm calling. Are you ready to answer that call?